Welcome to a Team SNG deck profile. Today we're going to be talking about an updated Fur Hire deck profile. The original profile will be in the description down below. Feel free to click on that, take a look. Not a massive amount has changed from that profile to this profile, but we'll talk about those changes when we get to them. Also, I'd like to remind you guys, leave us a like, comment, and subscribe. And while you're down checking out the previous profile, make sure you also check out the team's Facebook page. Head over there, give us a like over there. All the news about what's coming out comes up on that page, so you can sort of see what's going to be coming out in the next week or so. Alright, so what I do love about this deck is this deck has the ability to go first and build an interesting board, but it also has the ability to go second and build an interesting board. So we're going to talk about how this deck works. Basically, all the little monsters, they will special summon other Fur Hire monsters from the hand, and then the big monsters all have an effect based on the number of Fur Hires on the field. So we'll talk about each of those as we get to them. So let's get into it. Starting off with the monsters, first monster we run is Philo Messenger Fur Hire. I love this card. It basically can special summon any Fur Hire from the hand, because it's one of the little ones, but it also, if another Fur Hire monster is special summoned while this is on the field, you can special summon one from the grave. So it gives you a lot of recursion, it lets you play beyond, and it lets you combo off. It's a really good extender for the deck. And so in the test hands video coming out later this week, we will actually go into how this card works. Next, we run 3 copies of Dompa Marksman Fur Hire. Again, special summon any Fur Hire from hand. And also, when a Fur Hire monster is special summoned while this card's on the field, you get to destroy a face-up card on the field. So it just helps you pop things. It can be spells, traps, or monsters, so it's just a way to help you spot removal. Alright, next we run 2 copies of Dompa's sister, I'm assuming, Recon Scout Fur Hire. What this card does is when a monster Fur Hire is special summoned, while this is on the field, you can pop a face-down card. So again, a little bit of spot removal. Get rid of some of that background. Next, we have 2 copies of Helmer Helmsman Fur Hire. We don't really have this for its effect that it gets based off special summons. We have this because it's a different type and a different attribute, and so it can just be useful for us in that way. But its effect when a monster Fur Hire is special summoned is that it can let you discard a card Fur Hire, so it can be the spells or traps or monsters, to draw a card. So it just lets you fix your hand a little bit. Next we run probably the most important baby Fur Hire, and that is Beat Bladesman Fur Hire. What can I say? This is your Rhoda of the deck. If a monster Fur Hire special summon while it's on the field, you get to search out another Fur Hire monster. Then we run 2 copies of Seals Strategist Fur Hire. This is recursion. This lets us add back a Fur Hire from the grave when another Fur Hire is special summoned. And we have Bravo. This is a power card. Again, much like Helmer, this is really only here because it's a different attribute and a different type, and also because of the fact that it is a Fur Hire by name. But this gives you all of your Fur Hire monsters an additional 500 attack if another Fur Hire monster is special summoned while this is face up on the field. Now onto the big Fur Hires. We run 1 copy of Sagita. Sagita Fur Hire, if it's special summoned, you can inflict 500 points of damage for every Fur Hire monster except for itself that you control. So if you control 5 Fur Hires, including it, you do 2,000 damage. She has a secondary effect as well, which is that your opponent can only target her for card effects. Next we run 2 copies of Dinah Hero Fur Hire. This lets you take stuff out of your opponent's grave for every Fur Hire you control except for Dinah. So if you control 5, you take 4 cards out of your opponent's graveyard by banishing them. Also, this is the only Fur Hire monster your opponent can target with battle. So if you had, say, Sagita and Dinah on the field at the same time, then your opponent can only target Sagita for card effects and can only target Dinah for battle. It's really here to protect you if you end up with a weird hand where you have to leave like Beat sitting on the board. It helps protect Beat, and that's why I run 2 copies of it. Next we run Wiz Sage Fur Hire. 2 copies of her. What she does is you gain 500 life points for every Fur Hire that you control other than Wiz. Also, you can, as a quick effect, you can discard a for hire monster to negate a spell or trap that your opponent activates, and you can use that once per turn, so that gives you some negations. Next we have Raphael Champion for hire. Now this is sort of one of the big boss monsters of the deck, so I do run 3 copies of him. What he does is he lets you duality for however many cards for hire you control on the field, except for him. So, if you have 5, you get to look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you get to add any one of them to your hands. It doesn't have to be a card for hire, which is really good, because you can add some of the other cards that you need to help with the deck. So that's what he does, but he also has a negation effect like Wiz, where you send a monster for hire from hand to grave to negate a monster effect on your opponent's side of the field. That does it for our for hire lineup. We also run 2 copies of Arch Nemesis Protos and 2 copies of Arch Nemesis Escados. And it's because they run so many different attributes and so many different types that if we can lock our opponent out of whatever attribute or whatever type they like to use, we can do that using these 2, and that will give us the ability to sort of lock our opponents out of being able to play against us. That's just one way that this deck can help you control the field of battle. Alright, and that does it for our monsters. Let's go on to our spell lineup. In our spells, we run a few for hire cards, obviously. The first of which is Mayhem for hire. Now this is probably one of the most important cards in the deck. This being a quick play spell is really important because of the fact that it does allow us to special summon a monster from grave on our opponent's turn, which will then trigger any baby for hires that we have left on the field. So it can be very important for us to be able to do that. Also, this is just really useful on our turn, being able to activate this and act as a monster reborn, again triggering baby for hires on our turn. All of the baby for hire special summon effects is once per turn, so it is really critical that we find other ways to special summon monsters because we're going to need to use them multiple times in a turn. Next we run 1 copy of Fandora the Flying Fortress. Not super important, but it does have a board wipe effect, which is if you control 5 or more monsters for hire, you can send this card from the field to the grave to destroy all cards on your opponent's side of the field. The downside is, this doesn't let you do any battle damage for the rest of the turn. The reason I do run this though is it does have a search your deck for any card clause. Instead of drawing, you can search your deck and add a card for hire to your hand. So, if you've got a sort of clunky hand and you need to get to one of your for hires, say beat or something, then this will let you find a way to get to it as long as it can remain on the field through your opponent's turn. The other thing that, as I say, that it does is if you end up in a situation where you just need to wipe out your opponent's board and start from 0, this does give you the opportunity to do that so long as you can get 5 for hires on the board, which is not super complicated with this deck. Now, as we said, being able to special summon in ways other than our baby for hires is important, and for that, to that cause, we run 2 copies of World Legacy Succession. Again, just recurring from the grave. Now, we've talked about Beat a couple times. Beat, as I say, is the most important baby for hire we run, so being able to search him out using Rhoda is really good because he is the only warrior type monster in the deck, and also being able to recur him with the warrior returning alive can be really good later in the game, say turn 2 or 3. And that does it for our spell lineup. Alright, let's get on to our traps. Our first trap that we run is 2 copies of Training for Hire for all your training needs. Do I need to say anything else about the name? I'll give you a second. Alright, so we're all on the same page. That is an awesome name for a card. Good. Now, what this does is if a for hire monster on your side of the field is destroyed, you can special summon a for hire monster from the deck whose level is lower than the one destroyed. That's really all it does, but it does give us the ability to special summon monsters on our opponent's turn, potentially triggering off other effects. And now, the most important trap in the deck. There can be only one. This is so good in this deck. You run so many different types. A lot of decks are monotype these days, so your opponent's going to be locked into one monster and you're going to be having 4 or 5 on the board to help deal with it. So this is kind of the win con of the deck. If you can get to this, you're in good shape. Alright, and that really does it for the main deck. So, let's get on to the extra deck. The extra deck's varied, and there is room for interpretation, so take this with a grain of salt. However, the most important card in the deck that you need to run is Fulgo Justice for Hire. Now, I run 3 copies, because I do often find myself going through 2 copies in every couple turns, so I like to have a third just in case, but in all honesty, you'd probably be fine running 1, or maybe 2, in case he does get destroyed. He's got a couple really handy sort of effects. The first effect he's got is, if something on your opponent's side of the field is destroyed, draw a card. If you control 3 or more for hires, draw 3. He also has an effect that when he's special summoned, you can special summon a for hire from the deck of a different type to the materials used to special summon him. In the test hands video, you'll probably see me go into this and use his effect to search out Philo, Messenger for Hire. And then what I'll do is I will special summon another for hire using Philo's special summon effect, and then it will let me special summon another for hire from the graveyard using Philo's second effect. So, this card's really important to the deck, and it does give the ability to extend far beyond. The one thing you do have to remember is that it cannot be used as link material. So, we run a load of different link monsters in the deck, lots of utility cards, things like that. First, Salamangreat Almiraj. We have a few monsters that are lower than 1,000, so this can just sort of be a way to get monsters off the field and give us space on the field if we need to be in that sort of boat. Next, we run a Nightmare package in Nightmare Phoenix, Nightmare Cerberus, and Nightmare Unicorn. Just typical Nightmare package. Link 2s and Link 3s. They're generic, which is the important thing why we run them. Now we run some Link 4s. We run 1 Borolo Dragon, 1 Boral Sword Dragon, 1 Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax. If we can get into 2 Link 2s, we can go into Avramax. Boom. Not that I actually go into these guys that often. They are really good, but you know, they're very utilitarian, sort of use them as necessary. The Link 4 I typically actually find myself going into is Saryuja Skulldread. It's really easy to build this using 4 monsters with this deck, due to the fact that all of the monsters special summon more monsters from their hand. So, being able to go into Saryuja with 4 materials and basically fix my hand, and maybe even find there can only be 1, or maybe find an arch nemesis, so that I have 3 boss monsters on the field at once, potentially, is really good. Now, there's a new addition to the deck, and that is the Arrival Cyberse Adagnister. Now, he requires 3 monsters with different attributes. He gains 1,000 attack for each monster used as material for him. He is unaffected by card effects, and he can also act as a token generator by targeting a card on the field and destroying it. So that does give you the ability to continue climbing and doing more with him. So he is a really valuable card. The one problem is that if you go into Fulgo before you go into him, you can't go into him because you can't use Fulgo's material. So what you then have to do is you have to use a Link 2 and 4 monsters to go into him. So you can't go into him using Fulgo. That's the only thing you do have to be aware of. Alright, now we run a couple XCs. We run a rank 2, number 64 Ronin Raccoon Sandayu, just for Recon and Dampa plays. We run a Light Dragon Adagnister, just for the spot removal, and for the... he can be made with Bravo and Seal. And then we run number 11 Big Eye, who can be made with 2 copies of Wiz. If you end up with 2 copies of Wiz on the board, that's fine. You turn him into a Big Eye, you start taking stuff from your opponent instead. Alright, and that does it for the extra deck. Alright, so as I say, this deck is very fun. It can be very fast. It kind of has a vomit my hand onto the field kind of feeling to it. I really do enjoy it though. The one problem is it can be fragile. If your opponent is to affect Veiler, your baby for hire, who you're using to special summon something from the hand, you can be in real trouble. That is part of the reason that I run Salamangreat Almiraj though, is so that if they do stop your baby for hire and you use one of the smaller ones, you can link it off and then potentially use Mayhem for Hire or Worldless Disease Succession to bring them back. Now, as I say, it's kind of depressing that the main win con for the deck is to get there can only be one, but we do have a couple other control elements now using the Arch Nemesis package and also using things like the Arrival Attic Nister. I thoroughly enjoyed the deck though. I do think it has its place in the game and it is a lot of fun. So with that being said, guys, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you you think about taking this deck with you guys to locals or to any other events you might be going to. I hope everyone is staying safe during this trying time. Hopefully on Wednesday, the 27th of May, 2020, there will be the test hands video for this up. Link to that will be in the description below as soon as it is up. So, with all that being said, guys, don't forget to leave us a like, comment, subscribe, check out the Facebook page, and I will see you guys at the next profile.